I was 45 when the wind changed. Not outside, no. Inside. That year, something in me stopped pretending. I didn't collapse. I didn't break down in tears in a supermarket aisle. It wasn't loud like that. It was quieter, more ordinary. One morning I was shaving and I looked into the mirror, and for the first time I didn't recognize the man looking back. He looked tired, not from lack of sleep, but from years of carrying things that no longer made sense. Titles, expectations, shoulds. I had a good job, a family, a house with a lawn I mowed every Sunday. From the outside, I was exactly what a man in his 40s was supposed to be. But I felt hollow. I didn't tell anyone. Not then. I just moved through my days like a man walking underwater, still performing, still doing, but slower, heavier. People think 45 is the midpoint. I can tell you now, it's not the middle. It's a fork in the road. And if you don't stop to ask where you're headed, you'll find yourself speeding toward a life that doesn't belong to you. There's a photo from that year. My wife took it at a barbecue. I'm holding a beer, smiling. The kids are around me. I'm wearing a blue button-up shirt I thought made me look younger. And I look fine. But I remember exactly what I was thinking in that moment. Is this it? Not in a bitter way. Just confusion. Because I'd done everything they said to do. Worked hard, stayed loyal, showed up. And yet something felt missing. That's one of the truths I didn't see coming. Success without alignment is just another form of suffocation. I had built a life I was supposed to want, but I hadn't stopped to ask what I actually needed. Looking back now, I think that's the year I started to grieve a version of myself that never got to live. I didn't talk to my father much in those days. We had an understanding kind of silence, cordial but distant. He was a hard man, came from a time when love looked like roofing a house and never leaving. But that year I went to visit him. Sat on the porch, drank his bitter coffee, listened to the wind in the cornfield behind his house. I asked him, "Did you ever feel like you were just going through the motions?" He didn't answer for a long time, just stared at the horizon. And then he said, "I think I stopped asking questions around your age." That stuck with me, because I realized I had a choice, to go numb and function, or to stop, risk the unraveling, and find out who I really was beneath the armor. I didn't make that choice right away, but something in me shifted. I started waking up earlier, sitting in my car before work with the engine off, writing thoughts on receipts, napkins, anything I could find. Not poetry, not plans, just truth. Little pieces of myself I hadn't heard in years. I remember a conversation with my wife that fall. We were folding laundry, nothing dramatic, just cotton and silence. And I said, almost accidentally, "I don't know who I am when I'm not working." She looked at me, not startled, not annoyed, just knowing. And she said, "Maybe it's time to find out." That was all. No ultimatums. No therapy brochures. Just one line that cracked something open. Because deep down, I knew my identity had become my output. I measured myself by how full my calendar was. How many people needed me. How many emails I answered before breakfast. But I was starving. Not for food. Not for sleep. But for stillness. For space. For permission to be someone beyond the provider. That's what hit me hardest that year. No one ever tells men at 45 that it's okay to change their definition of strength. It doesn't have to mean control, dominance, endurance. Sometimes strength is letting go of what no longer fits, even when it's all you've ever known. That year, I started noticing how quiet our dinner table had become. Not because no one was speaking, there was always chatter, always some story from the kids or something about work. But underneath it all, something was missing. Connection. I realized how often I was answering with half my mind still at the office. Nodding while thinking about deadlines. Saying that's nice without hearing a word. My body was home, but my attention was rented out. And what no one tells you, until it's too late, is that love doesn't die in loud fights. It dies in those silent nods. In distracted yes. In the small moments where presence was needed, and you offered performance instead. By 45, I had become a master of functioning. But I had forgotten how to feel. There was a Sunday morning. I remember it clear as day. The kids were outside, the dog barking at a squirrel, and Eleanor was reading on the couch. I sat down beside her. I don't know what came over me, but I said, "Do you think we're happy?" She looked up slowly, not startled, just searching. Then she said, "I think we're surviving. I think we're doing our best. But no, I don't think we've been truly happy in a long while." That answer shouldn't have surprised me, but it did, because I thought doing everything right was supposed to equal happiness. Turns out, happiness doesn't come from ticking boxes. It comes from being seen. And I hadn't truly let her see me in years. Not the fearful parts, not the confused parts. Just the version of me I thought a husband was supposed to be. Strong, capable, certain. But inside, I was crumbling. Quietly. Took me months to admit that I didn't know what I wanted anymore. That's another hard truth at 45. You can outgrow a version of yourself and not realize it until the seams start pulling. And the world won't warn you. It'll applaud you for keeping it together, for being consistent, for staying the course. But what if the course is leading you somewhere you no longer belong? I started journaling, not because someone told me to, but because I had nowhere else to put the thoughts. The real ones. The ones I didn't dare say out loud yet. Things like, I don't know who I'd be if I weren't working 60 hours a week. I miss the boy I used to be. I'm scared my marriage is more habit than love now. Writing them down didn't fix anything, but it made it harder to lie to myself. And sometimes that's the first step. Around that time, I ran into an old friend, David. We hadn't seen each other in years. Sat down for coffee, and within minutes he said, "You look tired, man. Not just tired. Worn out." I could have brushed it off. Said work was crazy. Blamed the weather. But I didn't. I said, "Yeah, I don't think I know how to rest anymore." He nodded. Sipped his coffee. Then he said, "Me neither." That conversation stayed with me, because it reminded me how many of us were walking around like that. Successful on the outside, but slowly eroding from within. And we thought we were the only ones. One night, Eleanor asked me if I still loved her. Not in a dramatic way, just softly, a whisper across the sheets. And I froze, not because the answer was no, but because I didn't know how to say yes in a way that felt honest. I loved her. Of course I did. But love had become this quiet, worn-down thing. Less about passion, more about proximity. Less about tenderness, more about routine. I reached for her hand, and all I could say was, "I don't think I've been loving you well." And she squeezed my hand and said, "I know, I haven't either." That night, we didn't solve anything. We didn't promise to change. But we named what had gone unnamed for too long. And in that naming, something softened. Sometimes, healing doesn't begin with action. Sometimes, it begins with the courage to tell the truth. If you're still here, leave me a comment. Tell me, have you ever felt that quiet shift inside? The one that doesn't announce itself, but changes everything? I'll be here listening like always. That autumn, I started noticing how many things I had missed. Not the big milestones, we were always there for those. Birthdays, recitals, parent-teacher nights. But it was the in-between moments I had traded away. Like the way my son used to wait at the top of the stairs for me to come home from work, baseball glove in hand. Or how my daughter once fell asleep in my office chair, just to be near me when I worked late. I'd say, "We'll play tomorrow," or, "Just let me finish this one thing." And somehow tomorrow kept getting pushed. By 45, I had built a fortress out of responsibility. It looked noble from the outside. Early mornings, late nights, bills paid, fridge full, house steady. But the truth is, I was hiding behind it. Because it's easier to be busy than to be present. Easier to overfunction than to feel vulnerable. Work gave me a script, a role, a version of myself I could control. But at home, I didn't know how to sit still, how to just be. That's one of the hardest things I learned at 45. You can be physically present in a room and still feel completely absent. One evening, I came home early, just an hour early. The sun was still warm on the porch. The kids were in the living room drawing. Eleanor was in the kitchen humming. No one had expected me yet. I stood in the doorway and just watched for a moment. It was beautiful. Ordinary, but beautiful. And then it hit me. I'd missed this version of my family. The unposed one. The version that unfolded while I was always chasing just one more thing at work. It hurt deeply to realize how much life had passed while I was trying to secure the future. I started asking myself some uncomfortable questions that year. Not just, am I happy? But deeper ones. Like, am I proud of the way I've loved? Have I been more loyal to my image than to my actual self? If my life stopped right now, would the people I love know who I really am? Those weren't easy questions. And the answers even less so, because I had mastered being dependable. But I had not yet learned how to be emotionally available. There is a difference. One keeps the house running. The other makes it feel like home. At work, I was praised constantly. Promotions, bonuses, handshakes, the kind of recognition that feeds a man's sense of worth. But at home, I was distant, not cruel, not cold, just foggy, like I was always a few steps away from real connection. I thought my job was to protect my family from the weight of the world. But somewhere along the way, I started protecting them from me. My fears, my questions, my doubts. I didn't want to burden them. But love doesn't grow in perfect answers. It grows in honest presence. And what I've learned since is this. You don't have to be everything. You just have to be there. I started doing small things differently. Not dramatic changes, just little moments of courage. Like putting my phone down when my daughter asked me about her day. Or telling my wife I was feeling unsure about the direction my life had taken. Or sitting next to my son in silence and letting him know I didn't always have the answers, either. And it felt strange at first, but it also felt real. Because real life doesn't happen on the other side of achievement. It happens right in the middle of the mess. There was one night, after everyone had gone to bed, I sat in the kitchen alone, the hum of the fridge the only sound, and I wrote something on a napkin, just one sentence. I don't want to wait until retirement to live like I'm alive. I read it again, folded it, put it in my wallet. That napkin stayed there for 10 years. And every time I thought about putting off a meaningful conversation, or delaying joy, or hiding behind work, I'd take it out and read it again. Sometimes your whole life pivots on a single sentence you write to yourself. There comes a time when the damage is done. Not by one blow, but by 1,000 small absences. 1,000 moments when we were too busy, too distracted, too afraid to speak honestly. I saw it most clearly in Eleanor's eyes. She didn't look angry. She looked tired. Tired of trying to reach someone who kept showing up in body, but not in soul. Tired of waiting for a version of me that she once knew, open, silly, affectionate. And the thing is, she never asked me to be perfect. She just wanted me to be with her, not around her. That was the year I realized. You don't lose people when they leave. You start losing them the moment you stop showing up. We tried. We really did. There were counseling sessions, long talks in parked cars, weekends away, books with underlined passages. But the truth is, healing doesn't happen just because you want it. It happens when both people are ready. And I wasn't ready soon enough. I kept clinging to my old defenses. Logic, deflection, the I'm doing my best speech. But love doesn't live in defenses. It lives in surrender. And I didn't know how to surrender yet. She didn't leave me, but she did leave the part of herself that used to reach out. Her smile became more polite, her hugs shorter, her eyes harder to hold. We shared the same bed, the same routine, but the warmth had gone quiet. That kind of distance doesn't shout, it drifts. And one day, you wake up and realize, the house is still standing, but it's empty. And maybe the harshest truth I learned at 45 was this. Some things, once lost, can't be fully returned to. They can only be honored. That winter, I took long walks by myself. No headphones. No destination. Just walking. I started noticing things I hadn't seen in years. The way frost gathers on the tips of grass. How birds move as a group, yet each has its own rhythm. The sound of my own breath. Sounds simple, but it broke me open. Because for the first time in a long time, I wasn't performing. I wasn't being dad or manager or husband who has it all together. I was just a man, 45, walking through the quiet, trying to remember who he was before the world told him who to be. One evening, my daughter brought home a drawing she made at school. It was of our family. Stick figures, smiling faces, our house a square with windows. I asked, "Who's this one?" Pointing to the tallest figure. She said, "That's you. You're always at work, so I made your arms super long, so you can reach us from the office." I laughed, and then I cried, because that's how children forgive. They imagine a world where your absence still has good intentions. But I didn't want to be a long-armed silhouette anymore. I wanted to be there, truly there. I made changes, small at first. Took a day off just to have breakfast with them. Left my phone in the drawer after 6 p.m. Started saying, "I love you," even when it felt awkward. Not because I had the answers, but because I didn't want regret to do the talking for me anymore. And here's what I learned. Presence isn't dramatic. It's built in the smallest of choices, and it's always worth it. Now, looking back from where I am, decades later, I don't remember the spreadsheets I stayed late to finish. But I remember the way my daughter's hair smelled after her bath. I remember how Eleanor looked when she fell asleep on the couch, book still in hand. I remember the night my son asked me if grown-ups get scared too, and I finally said, "Yes." You don't get those moments back, but you do get to choose differently starting now. And that choice, that's where everything begins to shift. I was 45 when I realized the life I was living had momentum, but no meaning. It was like being on a train that never stopped. And one day you look up and don't recognize the landscape anymore. And then you wonder, when was the last time I chose the direction? Most people assume midlife is a crisis. I think midlife is a calling. Quiet one. It doesn't come with sirens or ultimatums. It comes in moments, brushing your teeth, watching your children sleep, hearing a song that used to mean something, and suddenly you feel the ache. Not of regret, but of awakening. I didn't change everything overnight. I didn't sell the house or move to the mountains. I still went to work, paid the bills, mowed the lawn. But I started showing up differently. I listened more. I asked better questions. I hugged longer. I stopped treating joy like a luxury. I let myself grieve the time I had spent asleep in my own life. I let myself hope that even at 45, it wasn't too late to come home to myself. And maybe that's the truest thing I can tell you. It's never too late to return to the life you were meant to live. But it will not wait forever. There are people who never make the turn. They feel the stirring, the emptiness, the quiet knocking, and they keep walking, keep producing, keep performing, until the day comes when it's too quiet to hear anything anymore. I almost became one of them, but I got lucky. Someone loved me enough to stay. My body slowed down enough to force stillness. And something inside me, a boy I had buried beneath achievement, finally knocked hard enough for me to answer. He didn't want much, just to be seen, to be heard, to be held, not by others, but by me. Now I'm 80. The mirror has changed again, but this time I recognize the man looking back. He carries losses, yes, but he also carries peace, because he made the turn. He didn't do it perfectly. He took too long. He stumbled. He said too little too late in more than one case. But he turned. And that has made all the difference. So if you're standing in that strange middle place, not quite young, not quite old, still running but starting to wonder what you're running from, stop, sit down, breathe, ask yourself quietly, if I weren't trying to prove anything, what would I do next? Then listen for the answer. It may not come right away, but I promise you, it's still there, beneath the noise, beneath the doing, waiting, just like you've been. If you'd like to return, you know where to find me. This space doesn't go anywhere. I'll be right here, rocking in this old chair, watching the light change, grateful that you stopped by, even just for a while, or